What's up, everybody? Time for another episode of the Cyber Diner podcast presented by Cal Poly, California's Cybersecurity Institute. My name is Ryan, and today I've got yet another special guest with me who has a ton of information to share with you. Now, I apologize that you can't see my face right now if you're watching on YouTube, but due to some technical issues, we had to record this one audio only for the intro. But I'm incredibly glad to have you here, and I just want to say thanks again for watching and or listening. We hope that this show can be a jumping off point for you to dive deeper into the different cyber subjects that we talk about. And today's guest has a ton of further reading to share, so stay tuned for that. Just to remind you that we are on YouTube, so we're posting the video version of this podcast on the CCI YouTube channel. So you should head over there and check out the channel to see the video content and other stuff we have there. As always, the goal of this podcast is to connect folks who are interested in cybersecurity directly to the most pertinent conversations in tech by hanging out with the pros right here in the diner, virtually, at least for now. So if that describes you, pour yourself some coffee or tea or whatever you drink and come meet our guest. This week, we're chatting with Alethe Denis, cybersecurity consultant at Critical Insight. Broadly speaking, Alethe helps companies improve their security posture before compliance audits and other fun stuff like that. But she's also a professional social engineer. Now, we haven't talked much about social engineering on the show before, but in short, social engineering is the human side of hacking. I'll let Alethe expand more on that later. She actually got into security and social engineering largely through DEF CON, where she earned a few black badges for her talents and got banned from competing ever again, much like our other hacker friend Eric from the first episode of the show. So, she's a force to be reckoned with, one of the best, and we're lucky to have her here today. If you're interested in breaking into the cybersecurity industry, but maybe aren't sure how your skills might transfer, or maybe you don't think you have what it takes to make a full transition, stick around because Alethe is going to share how she hopped around from job to job early in her career and eventually used all the skills that she collected to land work in InfoSec and build a career that she's truly excited about. I'll also ask her to elaborate on social engineering and OSINT a bit, and together we'll have a ton to take away and keep investigating after the show. So, don't forget to check out the show notes when we're done. You could check them out now if you want at cci.calpoly.edu/cyberdiner/episode 5. But don't close this tab. We're just getting started, all right? And honestly, I kind of feel like we're just starting to become friends, you know, like pretty good friends. Anyhow, let's go meet Alethe. Welcome, Alethe Denis, to the podcast. If you wouldn't mind just kind of letting us know who you are and what you do on a day-to-day in cybersecurity.
Sure. So my name is Alethe, and I work for a company called Critical Insight, which is based in the Seattle area. Essentially, we focus on providing cybersecurity to organizations that are responsible for critical infrastructure. Think hospitals, water systems, manufacturing, DoD contractors, folks that are really in charge of making sure that our country stays up and running and that emergency resources and critical, things that we need every single day to exist are provided to folks, making sure that those organizations are secure and helping them to improve their security posture through things like MDR. We have one arm of the company that really focuses on the protect and identify side of things. And then I work in professional services where we do assessments, and we also do, dabble in the red team side of things. We do vulnerability scanning, social engineering assessments. And then we also help businesses to get ready and prepare for audits with things like HIPAA, security risk assessments, and CMMC, which is a newer framework that the DoD contractors are looking to get certified for. And then just a wide variety of different frameworks. Businesses with different priorities as far as certification come to us to kind of do the pre-game before they go into the audit.
The pre-audit is an interesting step. Yeah, I feel so. Auditing is kind of like it's a very specific step in the cybersecurity process. Can you elaborate just a little bit more on kind of what compliance looks like and how maybe you prepare companies broadly for something like an audit?
Sure, absolutely. So compliance is a huge component for businesses now, especially when we're considering third-party risk management, which is an area of the conversation that I think has really been brought to life over the last couple of years with the incidents and breaches and things that have impacted a lot of the high profile companies lately in the news. It's a challenge for businesses to protect themselves when their supply chain isn't doing the same. So lots of businesses have relationships with other vendors who provide different services, everything from your HVAC repair and the person who comes in and mops the floors at night, to people and businesses that provide consulting or materials or little boxes that go in your server rack that do specific things. Those are all connected to the client's network. And so third party risk management kind of looks at how to protect your organization against the risk that could be coming in through another organization. So a lot of companies that act as vendors, they're looking to get certified in different security frameworks and become compliant to different frameworks so that they can have basically a piece of paper that says, hey, we're safe to do business with because we're certified against this framework and we're compliant to this security framework. So we do all of these things, and an auditor has come in and said that we do all these things, that we can show and prove that we can do all these things, and that we are safe and reputable to deal with as a vendor for you, other organization. So there's really been a huge uptick in the number of companies that are hoping to get certified, because going through a third-party risk assessment from your vendor or your customer is a lengthy process. And if you can say, hey, I've got this piece of paper that already says I do all these things, that really cuts down on a lot of the administrative paperwork and back and forth, and it shortens timelines for relationships to kick off and for businesses to start working together.
Any way you can shorten that timeline will help people fit it into their security model, right? Because it's so important, especially we just did our last episode, we talked a lot about critical infrastructure. And when you think about all the third party, supply chain like related stuff that critical infrastructure relies on, you want to make sure that that is all compliant and it's got
Right.
so when you work with those kinds of like pre-audit stuff, is it all about just like helping companies make sure that they have uh, their ducks in a row, or is it is there anything that's kind of like
Sort of.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, for the most part, I mean, most people think of compliance and audit as pretty darn boring. It's dry. Do you do this? Are you performing this control? Do you check this box? Is a lot of it. It really is. But I find most exciting the aspects of the interviews where we go into the client side and speak to a number of their employees in various departments with various different functions within the organization. We don't strictly limit ourselves to talking to, say, the security team or the IT team, but we really take a whole organization approach to security with these organizations, because you can learn so much from all the different functions and departments within an organization, and learning about the types of technologies they use, learning about their budget challenges, and being able to come up with opportunities for improvement, ways that they can create process efficiency, cost efficiency, improve their productivity, really come in with some new ideas for how they can use the resources that they have more effectively. That I find extremely rewarding, because it gives them kind of a fresh perspective. And in a lot of these cases, we're really looking at going from good to great rather than
mm,
terrible to, okay.
sure, yeah,
And so that
that's
that makes
encouraging.
it fun, is that, we're kind of improving on something that's already functioning, but just kind of taking it to the next level. And when organizations are open and receptive to those kinds of items of feedback, and to really participating in these engagements, they can really gain a lot from them just through the process of us sharing ideas and information, and talking things over. There's been situations where we've been discussing how maybe a client is storing information or moving information or sending information, and all of a sudden you kind of see the light bulb go off and they're like, oh my gosh, we are definitely transferring patient information in a way that is unsafe. And it kind of, they almost teach themselves that maybe that process isn't the greatest. And it's just through kind of exploring and leading them through their process that, we can help them to kind of identify things that maybe they hadn't considered before. And really, it really does impact and help the entire organization rather than us just coming in as, say, an auditor and, checking a box yes or no. We really like to get into the readiness assessments to honestly and truly help the organization improve their processes and increase their ability to defend against these types of attacks. Not to mention, prove to an auditor that they're actually completing those tasks.
Yeah, so in a way, you're kind of like a university professor getting them ready for the test about what
Yeah,
they're. Yeah,
basically.
but in a more fun way because you kind of get to play
It's
detective in a way and kind of.
yeah, it's kind of fun because we get to be like the fun coach rather than grading the exam, so to speak. So we really approach it from the standpoint of being all on the same team, and you know there's no stick that's going to get brought out if anybody's doing something quote unquote wrong. It's really just about identifying ways that we can help them improve their security posture and maybe discuss and identify things that probably shouldn't be happening in their processes now. Sometimes that's really limited because they don't have the capability to purchase newer hardware or software. And then, our report can help them to kind of get that approval from a board or from the folks that hold the purse strings.
Yeah, it's always great to have it in writing. Well, cool. Well, I want to get into kind of your backstory and kind of move on. We've got a laundry list of stuff to check off today. So, you mentioned you come from a sort of a non-cybersecurity related background, and you kind of found your way in. And I feel like the more I talk to people in the security space, it just seems common that people kind of fall into doing something cyber adjacent. Can you tell us a little bit about where you started and how you got to becoming, working in this field?
Sure, absolutely. So I did computer science in school. I think I was the first class of girls at my all girls high school that was doing coding and computer science and not like a typing class. So yeah, that kind of ages me a little bit, but I did still graduate in a year that started with a two, just barely. So I started off in college studying chemical and molecular sciences with a minor in computers because I really thought that I was going to go in more of like a biology, medicine, science direction than like a computer science coding and just at the time, security wasn't something that people really acknowledged as being a career path. It was all just kind of under the umbrella of IT. And coding was kind of the only way for me to get into the game. And I thought, I don't really want to sit in a room in front of a keyboard all day, just typing my life out away. And it's funny because now 20 some odd years later, I sit in a room in front of a keyboard typing my life away. But it's like I decided to go like kind of the biology route. And then life happened. There were some challenges in my personal life that kind of prevented me from really pursuing the degree. And I ended up leaving college and kind of going out on my own. And it was the life experience from that point until I would say about 15, well, maybe like 10 years ago, that life experience that really made me a fantastic social engineer through my experiences with relationships and people. And, a lot of those things really play heavily into the behavioral sciences and psychology of just dealing with people. But I kind of flopped around kind of aimlessly between jobs. I started working in a pet store. Then I went into title insurance, and that's where I started doing research and OSINT, open source intelligence gathering, and writing reports and kind of writing the title policies that would get issued every time somebody would purchase a piece of property. And then After that, I went into compliance and audit, and um, I ended up managing AT&T retail stores on kind of like the operations side. And so I did that for a while. And you can see like I'm collecting skills that are like super beneficial in cybersecurity and information security in general, but through like jobs that have nothing to do with that. And I think we'll talk about a little bit about that later. But after AT&T, then I went to back into title insurance, and I was leading a team that was offshore. And so I was managing a team of about 20 or 30 people who were kind of doing the research, and I was doing the management. I kind of got sick of sitting in a cubicle all day looking at, QAing reports and things like that. So I got some management skills, and that was great. But then I kind of did something crazy, and I was invited to be a social media manager for a competitor to Instagram. And this was like way back when that was still kind of like even a hope
Yeah.
that somebody could compete with Instagram. We all know how it turned out. But I did social media management and community development, online content development, marketing, and pay-per-click marketing, digital marketing, paid ads, all that stuff. And so I collected like this like ton of random marketing online social media skill set from doing this role. And then I actually, once that kind of died, they transitioned me over into like the main part of the company, which was an automotive CRM. So like car dealership, customer relationship management software. And so I led their support team, and I managed the help desk and managed all the people that handled tickets. And so like more random, totally information security adjacent stuff happened there, because we're dealing with like apps and web apps and supporting those and troubleshooting issues. And then once I finished there, I went into market intelligence, not marketing, but market intelligence at a multi-billion-dollar staffing company. And I started off in that team kind of just as an analyst, writing lots and lots and lots of reports. And by the time I left there, I was managing that team. And it was kind of like I got to this point where I, 2 years prior, had been awarded with the first place for the social engineering capture the flag at DEF CON. I had been, honored and extremely humbled to accept a black badge from DEF CON based on that win. And I knew that I really wanted to work in cybersecurity. Like I wanted that to be my main job, because at the time I was doing full time for the staffing company, managing an IT MSP my husband and I co founded, and migrating that over into a voice over IP company, which it is today. And then consulting and doing social engineering training, awareness training, assessments, phishing on the side, kind of just as like a side gig. And I have 4 kids. So like there was a lot going on. And I was just like, I just want one job. And so at that point, I had the opportunity to collaborate with Critical Insight, and we co-branded a few of my clients' engagements. They did more of like the technical scanning and some of the stuff that I just really didn't have time to do, doing 3 other jobs. And then I would go in and do like the training on site and do the phishing engagements and all that stuff. And I really just fell in love with the team. And so I didn't feel like, honestly, I didn't feel qualified at all for the job that I applied for. But what I learned was all of these soft skills, like communication, report writing, intelligence gathering, just being able to talk to people in a corporate setting and being confident and comfortable is like a big freaking deal. And you're talking to C-suite people at multi-billion-dollar companies and telling them they're doing things wrong, and you really have to put yourself in a position where you can command their respect. So that's a talent in and of itself. But I'm really, really lucky that they saw in me what they did. And that's how I made my way into like full-time cybersecurity role, is really just working so hard at like the hobby side, and then eventually just creating my own company so I could do it and kind of gain experience. Um, and then really selling all of the transitional skills that I could bring over from past experience.
Yeah, it sounds like there's so much. I mean, you kind of mentioned it in stride there, but there's so much transferable skills from your previous
Hmm.
gigs. I mean, can you highlight a couple that like really stood out that made working in this space a little bit more manageable that maybe aren't quite as technical, if that makes sense? Like some of those soft
Sure.
skills
Yeah.
that really put you ahead?
So I'll give you like two buckets. One that's a little bit more technical, but not super technical, and then the other bucket is kind of like just very raw soft skills. Like most of what I do is writing reports and being able to communicate my findings and ways that companies can improve their stance and how they can, take it from okay or good to like excellent or great is really difficult to do unless you really practice how to frame things, because you can deliver a message in 100 different ways and people are going to perceive that message very differently depending on how you phrase it, how you say it, how you frame it. What are you saying before and after that? Is there a way that you can kind of like cushion the blow or set them up for success or set them up to be more receptive to the message? um, and dealing with people in the higher levels of the staffing company and all of their clients really, really set me up for success in that regard. I learned so much about project management, deadlines, um, making sure that projects meet the interim update milestones, making sure that I'm effectively communicating to people where the project is, what we've done, what we need, all those types of things sound really simple, but you'd be surprised at how quickly that stuff falls away when you get busy. So those soft skills from the previous roles were absolutely things that, I couldn't really put value on, and I couldn't learn that stuff in school. That just really takes practice. And then on the more technical-ish side, um, I was one of those kids that wanted my MySpace to look cool, and so
Oh
I
yeah.
started. Oh yeah, started like coding cool things to make my MySpace look dank on
Wow.
the web.
They let you do
So
customized coding stuff on
yeah, MySpace
MySpace.
used to let you
Interesting.
custom code templates and stuff, believe it or not. Yeah. And so that kind of transitioned into like content management systems, learning how to use Joomla, WordPress, those kinds of things. And it sounds really dumb, but those skills, like making things look pretty on the web, really come in handy for things like pay-per-click marketing and the ads and things that I was putting together for the car dealerships. And I had like over $10,000 worth of ad spend per dealership. So they really were putting a lot of faith in my ability to get people who were ready to buy cars to click on these ads and using their money effectively. So those two kind of things led into actually developing websites. I started developing WordPress websites kind of like as a side gig for my husband's clients at the IT MSP. And then now I use those skills to make phishing emails.
Oh, they all come back. Yeah,
So
full circle. Good
yeah,
stuff.
they all come back. So now my Bank of America phishing email looks like a Bank of America phishing email because it's got all the right colors and the buttons are the same styles and all that HTML fun stuff. Which by fun I mean terrible, but
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a little bit more cumbersome in emails than it is, in content editors, but
yeah.
um,
Nowadays everything's so visual. Back in the day it was like, hunting through code looking for variables and then
yeah,
flip-flopping the,
right.
color
Well,
codes and things.
in the way that things have changed, I mean, have you noticed? I kind of wanted to kind of dig into one thing you said there, which was the soft skill of being able to communicate the importance of your work up the ladder. Um, I mean, where are we in the kind of progression of getting people to understand that security is important, that it needs to be, kind of at the sea level? Um, and how is that kind of soft skill? How do you get people to understand, you know?
So I think that the media attention on breaches has been very helpful for us because, there's big companies that have been impacted by breaches, vulnerabilities, and have had incidents that have hit the news in the last couple of years. We've got a lot of folks that are working from home. We've got a lot of risk with those individuals now that are working remotely. And so I think companies are starting to hear the message, and they are more receptive. When we're talking about C-level employees, the thing that I have learned is to limit the technical speak, really limit it, because it turns people off and they don't engage with you during the conversation if they feel like you're talking over them or you're trying to just sound smart. So really, really keeping yourself kind of humble. And even if you feel like they are not grasping the concepts of the message, don't try to make them feel smaller. And it's not going to be beneficial to the conversation at all. So what I try to do is I try to keep things very simple, not because I believe that they have diminished intelligence or anything like that. It's really just it's a conversation aid. I want them to feel like they can participate in the conversation and that we're going to meet at the same level. They may be bringing a lot to the table that I don't understand when it comes to budgets and boards and rounds of funding and all of that stuff, and I'm bringing something a little bit different, and we've got to learn how to communicate in the same language. So for me, I try to keep things like, for example, presentations, 7 slides total for the hour. Each slide should have no more than 7 bullet points, and each bullet should have no more than 7 words, because you really want to just get to the point. These people are very busy. They don't have time to listen to the preamble and the backstory. They just really want to know, what did you find? How was this a problem? What was good? And how can I fix the problems? And that's it. And that's really it. you can send them the 400-page report, and they will probably print it out on paper, but they're not going to read it. It's really just, it's all about that executive summary and really condensing down your message so that people hear it. And this is another thing that I think is really something that we can even see in like social media advertising and content that people are developing for the internet. And that's something I think a lot of people are familiar with. Like, you've got 15 seconds of my attention. That's it. And if your video doesn't grab me in that first 5 seconds, I'm scrolling on. And that's kind of the perspective that I have when talking to the C-suite folks is they really don't have a lot of time. I really have to get my message in there, and I have to get them to hear it. So how do I make it accessible? And how do I let them know, who I am, what I'm about, why they should listen to me, and when I'm going to leave? Because that's all they want is for me to go.
Go make their company better.
Go away. Yeah. So, and I mean, this is true of like interactions that we have with everyone every day in our lives. Like, they just want to know who you are, why should I listen to you, what benefit is this conversation to me, and how fast can I get you out of my life? And if you can tell people that in like the first, 3 to 5 seconds of your interaction with them, you're much more likely to pull them into the conversation, because they know this isn't going to last long. You are an expert. You're here to help me, and this is who you are. And then you're good to go.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's a transferable skill for pretty much anyone in any context, but specifically when you're talking about something so technical like security, and those are some really good pointers to keep in mind. I kind of want to switch gears a little bit and talk more about the more of the technical experience that you have. A couple of areas. The first one being OSINT, and it seems like through when you were talking about your journey through different jobs and stuff, it felt like you kind of gained these different you gained different contexts to apply OSINT. Mm-hmm. And so, can you just kind of start with like can you give me like a layperson definition of what OSINT is?
Absolutely. So OSINT is defined as open source information, and typically we think of OSINT as gathering of that open source information, and that can be any information data that is gathered from any source that is public. Everything from the newspaper to Facebook to the billboards on the side of the road, anything that is publicly open, accessible, and not behind a paywall. That's the general description of what OSINT is. I believe that OSINT is information that you have access to. So in some cases, there are tools that you can use that may or may not have paid licensing or subscription services that will help to collect and then put that data into a more readily available form. For example, with property and real property, houses, pieces of land, all of that stuff is public record. And for the most part, you'd have to go to the county where those documents are recorded, those maps are filed, and request copies and do the research the hard way. But now, for example, there are resources online which will allow you to search that in a digital way. And it kind of takes that hard copy library and it sticks it into a fully indexed piece of software that you can access through a web app. So, you can get to open source intelligence in a variety of different ways, but there are absolutely tools that can make that easier. I try not to get hung up on the tools part, really, because a lot of the times the old school sleuthing and investigation, you'll actually be able to find more than if you're limiting your view with a specific tool.
So when you're kind of employing these skills, how is it different from like doing research for maybe like a academic paper, or maybe doing research for I don't know, maybe doing like market research? Like what kind of, where does this kind of fit in the whole go out on the internet and find stuff story?
so so I have 19 years of OSINT experience, and I will say that each one of my roles has used similar but in a different kind of a niche aspects of that. The most essential part of OSINT is really that critical thinking and analysis component where you are able to analyze what you've found, figure out what it means to your investigation, and then pivot or change direction or follow that trail like a detective to see what more you can learn in that same vein. There's definitely the chance that you'll go down some rabbit holes, but for the most part, being able to identify useful information and then also being able to correlate that data back to other points or associate that with the elements that you're trying to prove or disprove, that is what is critically important to producing information that is relevant and useful in the context of whatever project you're working on. So that's what I would focus on skills wise, is really that ability to analyze and then critical thinking to make better decisions about what path to follow and how to creatively find information without being dependent on tools.
Without being dependent on tools is an interesting little caveat, but it makes me think that, you know, you can really get better at being a Googler.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's fancy Googling for sure. And, there's different ways that you can source different pieces of information. One example is during the SECTF, I wanted to pretext as their, I wanted to pretext as somebody internal who was calling their internal IT help desk. And I needed the number that their employees call to reach their internal help desk, which is an offshore help desk. And so to find that, typically what I do is I go find all the information, then I come up with the pretext based on what I find. But in this case, I was trying to find the information to support my pretext. So it took a little bit longer. And it took me like 3 weeks of trying to figure out how to find this one piece of information. And what it came down to, like in all honesty, was a Google Dork that specified the document name or a keyword from the document name. So I was looking for like onboarding or new hire or something that would have like their help desk number in it. And I ended up being able to include the company name and I think the word onboarding and then I limited it to like a file type PDF. But for the longest time, I'd been in limiting my search to the domains that belonged to the target company. When I removed that limitation, I actually found the document on some random domain somewhere completely unrelated to the company. And it was like, well, that's creepy. And within the document, it was like, if you believe that anyone is misusing our company issued technology, call this number to report them. And bingo, I had the number. And I was like, yes. And it was like one of those things where it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, nobody's around, but I like stood up at my desk and like celebrated because I'd been looking for it for so long.
Yeah, well, so you started talking about, social engineering. Can we look at broadly? I think we don't need to bother with the definition of social engineering necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
but can you talk a little bit about pretext and what it means to build a pretext and kind of uh, use that skill and incorporate OSINT into all that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple of different elements of social engineering that I believe are very important. And briefly, social engineering is just the ability to influence somebody to do something, whether that's in their best interest or not, is kind of up for debate. But to do that, you really need to have all of your information and data that can back up your your mask that you're going to wear or the veil that you're going to wear to kind of conceal your true motives. And that's what your pretext is. Your pretext is the the lie that you tell when you say you are someone who you're not or somebody who should have access to the information that you're asking for and you actually don't. Um, so a pretext is really like a veil over your true intentions. And to support that pretext, you have to know the background of the job role or the data about the company that your target works for, that can support what you're going to say and help you to navigate through any challenges that that target potentially offers you. So if you say, this is Todd from IT, and they go, you don't sound like a Todd,
Mm.
you know, you really want to make sure that your pretext suits not only you, your personality, your disposition. It really is in line with the unconscious bias that humans just naturally have, and that it is going to kind of slip under the radar as far as raising any suspicion in your target. And doing OSINT and gathering the intelligence is going to help you do that. If I, call an employee to fish them over the phone, and I ask them to open their computer and go do a thing, if I don't know what computer they're using or what software they have on it, then they're going to say, well, I don't have that computer. I don't have that software. Wait, who are you? Where'd you say you're calling from? And then everything kind of spirals out of control. But if I'm able to do some reconnaissance and I find out through, images that are shared by employees on social media, for example, that they use this brand of computer and that they're using this version of software, then I can really lead them through without raising any suspicion. And for example, with the SECTF, I was able to have remote employees boot their computers up, confirm what kind of computer they were, their operating systems, their mail clients, their PDF viewer, the versions of the PDF viewer, the types of um, uh, different types of software that they were using. There's a variety of different flags in the competition that are awarded specific points. So there was a very clear goals. And the way that I did that was that I told them, A, I was an internal employee, B, that I was helping IT reach out to folks who hadn't connected to the VPN in a while because we're going to be going ahead and replacing some of our remote employees' laptops. And in an effort to replace yours, we want to make sure we have a list of all the software that you have on your machine now so that we can make sure that the new machine ships out with everything you need. So I've really kind of not only built rapport with them by saying that I'm an internal employee, I also incentivize them to answer my questions with the promise of an updated laptop. And there's no remote employee in the world who doesn't want a new laptop.
Of course not.
And, I was able to kind of just slip into this very comfortable conversation with them because I didn't even say I was from IT. Like I just said, I'm helping out.
Hmm.
And I kind of raised the octave and the tone of my voice to sound a little maybe younger, hopefully. And I gave myself a name that sounded a little bit closer to college and less close to millennial 40s. And I really tried to sound new and like an intern because I knew they had an intern program, and that was kind of my fallback. If they were like, "Well, what'd you say your name was? I don't see you in the global directory," because I didn't want to impersonate a real person. Then I was just gonna be, "Oh yeah, I'm just an intern on the IT side for the summer," kind of a thing. And so pretexts are very, very important. I've seen other individuals who have tried to use pretexts that were pulled off exceptionally well by a certain type of social engineer. And unfortunately, they don't, for whatever reason, have the confidence in their voice. And they're immediately under suspicion and they start getting 1,000 questions and they just can't navigate through the challenges. So the pretext is super important. It's very important that you use OSINT to inform your pretext, that you have facts to back up what you're saying, and that you can dance around questions and come up with answers that sound plausible in the event that you're challenged.
Well, it's kind of like conjuring up all these images of like spy movies that I've seen, and it
Yeah.
sounds like you really get to kind of play this role almost. And so aside from like wowing people at DEF CON and having this cool spy ability to talk about, how are people like it, how is this being used? I've seen I've heard of people doing penetration testing when it comes to like you know doing Wireshark and sending like a bunch of I don't even know most of the technical stuff. But when you're testing a system, it's different than testing people. Are
Yeah.
companies doing this kind of thing as well? Are they hiring social engineers to kind of red team against other parts of their system that aren't their servers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the most fun thing about being a part of a red team is that each person kind of brings their own unique skill set. And while most people on the team can do a variety of things, and there's definitely some cross ability between members, you kind of get to have like the person who loves doing the technical testing and the person who loves doing the social engineering side of things, and the person who can kind of do all of the handling of the client and the on-site stuff, and the person who loves doing physicals. And I think as I hear more stories from red teamers, I find that people kind of tend to find their specialty and fall in love with it. I'm kind of one of those people who likes to try everything. And so for me, like I get a little bit bored and I want a really good mix of different stuff to do. Um, so for me, it's really great because I get to kind of play a different role in each one of the projects that I participate in. And it's great that I get to kind of mix things up and see a different perspective. And while companies are absolutely looking for, wireless testing, application testing, just basic network vulnerability scanning, there's like this huge, just like card of services. It's like a giant menu that companies can pick off of. And depending on budget, they have to prioritize sometimes to just, start with one thing and maybe next year we'll do this or that. And you get to build these relationships with folks, um, and kind of watch this whole security strategy and their security team and their employees and everybody just evolve over time as you kind of open up their perspective on security through the different kinds of testing. So absolutely, like our team right now is completely overwhelmed. We're like booking out into Q2 of next year for vulnerability scanning, application testing, and all of the technical testing. And so our team is growing, which is very exciting. And as that happens, I get to experience so many different sides of red teaming, but it kind of feels it kind of feels like I'm on a show like Leverage. It's amazing because I do more of the social engineering and like compliance and enterprise consulting. But then when I get to kind of go outside of my comfort zone and get to try other things, It's really super fun, and my team has been incredibly supportive, and everyone is so mission focused with making sure that we deliver the best experience to our customers. That there's none of that, you know, like you can't do what I do because then I'm going to work myself out of a job kind of a thing, which I found at other organizations. So I've really had an opportunity to experience everything and to participate with all sides of the testing aspects. But the one thing that I want to do more of is the on-site physicals. And it's so great when you have folks on the team who can do like the operations side of the engagement and enable others to go do like, the Sydney Bristow on Alias type in the field work, which I think so many people think of when they think of social engineering. They really think that, you do everything and that you just walk in there like a rock star. But it really does take an entire team. You've got people that specialize in all different areas. And, taking the team approach makes the engagements that much more fun because you can really focus on what you want to specialize in and then have the support of the team when you get in trouble.
Yeah, it's always good to have some people behind you when things go haywire, especially when you're
Yeah,
pretending to be someone you're not. So that's great.
exactly.
There was a really interesting story I heard on this podcast called Darknet Diaries, which you probably heard of.
Yes,
That
fantastic.
walked through kind of an operation like that, and it was a long podcast, but it was so interesting.
Hmm.
And I just kind of think of like, it must be so much more fun to do it on a team because not only for the moral support, but just because it feels like a spy movie. To me, that's
Yeah,
what it
it
would be
does.
like.
It totally does. I mean, it totally does. It feels like you're on a TV show. It's ridiculous because I was just talking about this with somebody else this morning. Like, I can't believe that this is my job, that I do this every day. This is like the most fun job in the world. And it's work, mind you. I mean, report writing is never fun. There are days when I'm just like, the crying can stop when the words are on the paper. Like, it does get like a slog, especially if you kind of like let all the reports kind of pile up until the
Pile
end of the
up.
month.
Yeah, that's what gets
Yeah,
you.
it's rough, but the actual work is so rewarding and it's so much fun. Like I'm working on a phishing engagement right now, and the client is so engaged in the campaign and wants daily check-ins and sending me screenshots of like the internal conversation where people are starting to kind of get, oh, is this a phishing email? And now they're talking about it. And I almost love getting caught more than I love having people click on things. And like my phishing emails are super subtle. I don't go for the easy wins. I really try to style my emails to be completely non-threatening, so that there's no way that the recipient can misconstrue me as being malicious in my intent. So I don't like to use fear. I don't like to use like really harsh time constraints or threats or any of that nonsense. I know that there was a uh, very high profile company that used like a bonus right before the holidays last year as a fish. So awful. I don't do anything like that because I really want folks to learn from this experience and be receptive to the messaging behind the phishing test and fail in a way that feels like they're actually being supported and that the company can come to no harm. And so that's kind of how I structure my phishing engagements. But that said, watching the clicks come through does make me happy.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, it means you did
Because
your
it means
job
I'm doing
well.
a good job.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when I'm not the one doing the training. Like that's the
Right.
worst. That's
Right.
the worst
Yeah.
case scenario is that I deliver the training, do all the social engineering, phishing awareness, security awareness training, right? And then I come in and I do the test. It's like where do I want to be great at my job? Do I want to be really great at training folks and having them understand and know and learn and defend against the phishing emails? Or do I want to just be an excellent con artist? I don't know. Sometimes it's tough.
It's kind of nice
Sometimes
that you
it's
get to be
tough.
both, right? Like you
It's
get
kind of
to,
nice I get to be
yeah.
both. But if I'm really, really good at fishing them, when I did the training, it almost makes me feel like I'm a terrible trainer.
Oh. Yeah. Well, it
So
seems
yeah,
it's hard, right? Because I
there's
think
balance.
there's totally balance. There's fishing comes in so many different forms. I find the ones that are trying to that are more up the social engineering route of being kind of like on the phone, a real face-to-face interaction, or not face-to-face, but voice-to-voice.
Hmm.
Those seem to be the ones that get people the most, either worried
Yeah.
or they don't even notice because it's just
They
too good.
don't. If you get a vishing call from me, you probably won't even know that you've been vished,
Wow.
because that's my goal. My goal is that you get off the phone and go, "That was such a nice conversation," and then you just go get a cup of coffee and you forget about it. And I'll tell you, the two times that I competed in the SECTF, and I'm not allowed to compete anymore because I won, which is so depressing. But the two times that I competed, neither one of those organizations ever reached out to the contest runner, because if they reach out, they can get a copy of the report and they can see everything that I found and that I put in my report, and learn from the experience. Yeah, like the contest runner won't give them my information or anything like that, but they'll be able to get all the data and then learn from the incident. Neither company ever reached out. So they were completely unaware that anything had happened. Nobody reported anything. And I was kind of concerned because of the whole "you're getting a new laptop" scenario.
Yeah.
But I think they just kind of chalked it up to some weird phone call and left it at that. But that's really my goal. I'm getting ready to kick off a huge vishing engagement, and I'm really excited because the company is super stoked to do it. They're very excited about it. And so it kind of gives me a little bit more um, kind of freedom to get creative when they're fully invested and they want to, they really want to do the thing. So they're sharing information with me that'll be beneficial for me to use against their employees, but they're more receptive. When you have a client that's kind of like, "Well, I'm just trying to check the compliance box, just go ahead and do it. Let me know when the report's done," it's a lot less fun. When they want to participate and kind of see how things are going and engage with you, it's extremely rewarding because it means that they're there to learn and they're really open to discovering where their shortcomings are and then putting processes in place to mitigate that kind of risk in the future.
Yeah, well, it really seems like that sort of posture comes from a deep understanding of that it's not just about, like taking care of cyber, where systems are, they are digital systems, but they're also human systems. And it's all working together to you have to fortify all the walls.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and these attacks are layered. You only hear about like the lead hack that compromised the system, but what you don't hear about, generally speaking, is all of the phone calls or emails or, walkthroughs or, lurking that happened before that compromise, so that, the malicious bad actors could gain the information that they needed to make the pretext to get the access to find, the vulnerability that they wanted to exploit.
When it comes to like to kind of using these skills that help you with social engineering, and kind of OSINT being a big one of them. Um, Are there any like say I'm someone who like really enjoys the idea of open source intelligence, but maybe I just don't see my life as a spy movie, and I want to. Is there does it crop up in any other areas in security or related areas where you can use OSINT to help companies succeed?
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots of opportunities to use OSINT and those similar types of skills in a variety of industries. The first one that comes to mind, I think, for a lot of people is intelligence and law enforcement, and those types of roles within uh, law enforcement. Both, I mean, we're talking about both, federal and local government. There are opportunities to use OSINT skills for hobbies and for entertainment as well. You can participate in things like OSINT CTFs, which are becoming more widely available and more popular, also in virtual form from a variety of different places. For work, it's kind of, you're not going to find OSINT in a job description in most cases. You really have to kind of scour the job listings to see if there are any applicable responsibilities or requirements that would relate back to research and intelligence and analysis of data. Things like market intelligence, for example, maybe don't make a company better, but they can help make their clients better. And so, for example, at the staffing company, I was doing market research on different workforces around the world, learning a bunch about different cultures and their work ethic and productivity and cost, and then putting together information that our clients, employers, could use to make sure that they were putting their operations in the right country, that they were choosing the right spots throughout the United States to get the skills that they were looking for. I can decide that I want to put a ginormous distribution center in, this really, really cheap, inexpensive place to operate. But then if their population wouldn't even support the number of employees I need, that's a problem. So that's ways that you can, like, for the greater good, use OSINT skills. As far as using OSINT for security related functions, everything you're doing, say in a SOC or analyzing logs and doing research, that all really uses a lot of the same skills. And most of the entry to mid-level roles on like the security analyst and cybersecurity manager leads, those types of roles, you're doing a lot of that data analysis and filtering out false positives and learning what looks like an actual incident versus what's just that person that used their VoIP phone to call outside of the network and it triggered an alert. So yeah, I think OSINT can be used in a variety of different functions. Also, almost every industry. It just kind of depends on what you're passionate about, and then figuring out what roles would lean more heavily on intelligence gathering and analysis rather than just, completing a process or manufacturing an item of work each day. Having the ability to do research and kind of analyze things and come up with new data sets is something that will, for me anyway, it keeps things a little bit more interesting than just, say, producing one item of work every hour or whatever the productivity metrics are.
Well, that interview went a little longer than expected, but I just thought, why would we cut this off when we're learning such really cool, applicable stuff? I hope you heard a few things that excited you or made you want to learn more about how you can apply some of Alethe's career-building advice. And before you go, I want to make sure one more time that you're aware of the show notes for this episode. You can find them at cci.calpoly.edu/cyberdiner/episode 5. And they contain a bulleted summary of the interview along with links to further reading and anything else that was mentioned in the show. And in this case, on this particular episode, Alethe shared a lot of links with us, so I'm not kidding. There's a literal gold mine waiting for you on the show notes page. If anything that you heard today resonated with you and you want to read more, go check that out. Once again, thanks so much for stopping by the diner. I hope to see you back here again soon. This podcast is presented by Cal Poly California Cybersecurity Institute, where we're training the next generation of cyber experts to navigate today's complex threat landscape. To learn more about training and research programs, visit cci.calpoly.edu. Special thanks to the team of Cal Poly staff and students that helped put this podcast together, including CCI Program Manager Martin Minnick and Cal Poly students and alumni, including Grace Pickering, Lauren Boyer, Nathan Danielson, and Jared Contreras. A special thanks to the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation for support in the planning and production of this episode. This episode is made possible in part by the Department of Defense and California Governor's Office of Planning and Research. The content of this podcast reflects the views of the California Polytechnic State University at San Luis Obispo, California Cybersecurity Institute, and does not necessarily reflect the views of the U.S. Department of Defense, Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation, or the California Governor's Office of Planning and Research.